The engines on this old boat haven't run in a long time. The port engine, the one I'll be starting with, hasn't run in a couple of years, but I know the guys back then got it to idle. The starboard engine is much more of an unknown. It hasn't run in at least 17 years, maybe as much as 20. This episode of Everyday Mariner is all about trying to bring them back to life. I'm sure there's water in them, but aside from that, I'm going in pretty blind. I don't know much about these engines at all. My plan is to work through them in a logical order and hope that there's no nasty surprises, and hopefully we can get them to fire. Let's climb aboard and get started. Before anything else, I wanted to try turning the engine over by hand, but the front engine mount blocks access to the crank pulley nut, so that idea was out the window. I did try turning it over from the alternator and using the belt, but I couldn't get enough grip. So I started by pulling the spark plugs. I suspected that water had got into this engine, and sure enough, as soon as I pulled plug number 2, I could see it was dripping with oily water. I also dropped a boroscope into the cylinders to see if I could get a better look, and cylinder 2 was pretty messy. The other cylinders looked great though. I could still see the hatching on the cylinder boards. Since I had no idea if the engine was seized, I poured some ATF into each cylinder and let that soak in to help loosen things up. Then I drained the oil. The drain plug had an extractor attachment on it, but we didn't have an extractor handy. So I did it the hard way and cut down a bucket to fit under the engine. I got about half a litre of water out before the oil, and then I refilled it. With the cylinders soaking and oil replaced, I hooked up a battery and a remote start trigger. It was time to see if it would turn. I was fully expecting to make a mess without the plugs installed. When I hit the starter, fluid sprayed out the plug holes, but cylinder 2 launched a jet of water across the yard and hit the wall of the shop 20 feet away. It had way more water than I thought in it. Luckily nobody was in the way. After that little show, I cleaned up the plugs and put them back in. Next up, I hooked up a small fuel tank, then crawled into the wheelhouse to turn the key. The engine cranked just fine. A bit low in compression on cylinder 2, but it wouldn't fire, so I gave it a little help and poured some gas straight into the carb. I cranked it again, and it slowly came to life. It took a few seconds to catch, but once it did, it started pulling fuel from the tank on its own. I honestly wasn't too worried about this engine, knowing that it had run so recently, but it was a great feeling to see it run.
It's allowed. That's really fantastic. So with the success of the first engine being started, it's time to move on to the second one. So this engine, I know this engine hasn't been started in a lot longer, but first thing we need to fix is that it doesn't have a starter motor on it. So we've got a new starter, but I'm just going to try and make some space down here so I can get down and actually work on it. go. Dry feet. I'm just trying to figure out how this starter connects to this bell housing, and I can't see how it works. I'll have to compare it to the other one. Now before I get too carried away, I'm going to try turning the engine over by hand. Now I can't get to the bolt on the front of the crank pulley because the front engine mount's in the way. So since there's no starter motor on this, I'm going to just carefully pry on the ring gear and see if I can get some movement out of it. Yep, that's good enough for me. So, next job is to, I think we'll take the plugs out next, and then we can start soaking those cylinders. Well, that one wasn't even tightened up. Maybe they're all loose. Somebody was in here before. Yep. Somebody's been in here and loosened these off previously. Now I was worried that we were going to have water in this engine, just like the other one, because the carb was exposed. But I think we might actually be okay. There's a little bit of moisture on this one, but nothing like on the port engine. Now, just like on the port engine, I'm going to pour a little bit of ATF down each one of these spark plug holes. Because if this engine really hasn't run in over 17 years, then all the lubrication is going to have dropped down into the sump. So this engine is it's missing the bolts for the starter, and it's also missing a bracket for the starter. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to borrow the starter motor off the other engine for now, and all the hardware, and hook it up and just use that. So there's no easy way to show you what's going on here, but basically the starter is in a really difficult spot. Turn this on. A little bit better.
That's running pretty darn good.
Yeah. It does have a bit of a knock, but it's been sitting for 17 years. So now we've got 2 running engines, which is a huge milestone. One of them is going to need a starter, and it's probably going to need a fuel pump too, because it wasn't pulling any fuel. And both of those engines are going to need a full service and a good tune-up before they can be put into service. Next time on Everyday Mariner, I'll be moving on to the stern drives. Now, even though this is a steel hull, there are 2 thick plywood transom plates that the drives mount through. They act kind of like a transom gasket. Both of them are completely rotten and leaking really badly, so the drives will need to be completely removed and the plywood replaced before we check over, service and test the drives. So if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.